special feature.
Tickle.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net's Botched Roll. I'm your host, Mike the Birdman, and this is the show that I've resurrected more than a few times here on the show. Much like every Dungeons & Dragons game, sometimes it falls apart before it starts. But this time around, I'm a little bit more flexible on my time and scheduling, and I'm actually actively playing in a few different role-playing games, and I'm actually game mastering one on the weekly regular with a group of friends that I've met here in Guelph, and it's a fairly fantastic time. So last time on the show, I recorded it just before the Christmas break, and it just came out a couple of weeks ago. So this one, it's hopefully going to be evergreen. We're kind of talking about something a little bit different. And the last time I talked about Star Wars prep, and from the couple of sessions I've had in that game so far, it's actually going really well. Feels more like episodes of Star Wars TV shows as opposed to Star Wars movie. And that's actually going tremendously well. I'm having a lot of fun using the old Star Wars West End game system. Do still need to brush up on some of the rules, but I'm an improvisational game master. I can make up stuff on the fly as long as my memory remains relatively intact, and I can remember the different plot threads that I've got hanging. Really, really fun group to play with. I've had a chance to introduce some interesting characters in that game, such as a unique-looking biker scout that I kind of modeled after that one guy in Ahsoka. I called him Captain Geech. If you know what that's a reference to, then you may enjoy the Shrimp Shack shooters. And I also have this interesting hut type person. I got all of these Duros, which seems to be my go-to alien race because it's the one I can easily identify with these guys. But regardless, it's going fun. I have an Ewok Jedi named Nuck. I have a person who's kind of like Donnie Yen from Rogue One, who has a droid who's basically an instant coffee pot who can shoot people and is kind of like a seeing eye droid. And I've got a Verpine in the group, and I got your default human smuggler. And it's going interesting so far. So I'm really happy with that group, and I guess the next time I do a botched roll, I'll update you on how that's going. So today's going to be a little bit different. So for many years, I have been receiving review product from Wizards of the Coast, and I like Dungeons & Dragons. I do. I just don't like game mastering it. It's a world that I'm not super familiar with all the lore. Up until remarkably recently did things kind of change for me, and that started with playing Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3, for those of you that don't know, and I'm sure there's like 5 of you out there, huge RPG that got released last year by Larian Studios. We reviewed it back on the show. And this past holiday on Twig, I was able to take a few weeks and go through it. And I was able to recreate the character I play in my friend B's game as a monk. Monk/rogue. I created my character of Janessa. And I'm doing a second playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 to see what I can get this time around, because I did miss quite a bit the first time around, but I did get a really happy ending, so I'm really happy with what that happens. I'm pursuing a different romance this time, and it's great. But Dungeons & Dragons to me has always been one of those games where you either really, really love it or it's something to play. And back where I'm from, way back in the day, I used to play AD&D 2nd edition, and my first game master was frankly trash. I'm sorry, Jamie. It just was not an engaging session. I never got the role play, and I've realized over the years of thinking about it, that's because I was having the dungeon crawl experience with very light story. There was never a lot of motivation. There was never a lot of subtext baked into why people are doing what they are doing. And over the years, as I've produced things with Terrible Warriors, and even when I did Fools Who Ride, I wanted to do something a little bit differently. And I did have fun game mastering those sessions. Those are the ones I've had the most fun with. Doing Cambridge Chronicles back on the podcast was kind of it was a good experience in some ways, but not as creatively fulfilling as I would have wished. And that's maybe because I placed too high expectations on players. Like, it's like I literally expect to be sitting around the table with like Ed Greenwood, the Gygax family, and, you know, Matt Mercer. And you know what? That's entirely on me, and I completely own that. That I'm continually looking for that D&D experience. And recently, I think I may have found it. So I've been playing in a private group for many months now, and we typically meet on like Mondays and Thursdays. And Thursdays I've now taken over for Star Wars, so my one friend can have a break from DMing so they can actually play, and they're having a blast, and that's fucking awesome. But the Monday game, I was DMing for a while, and then I got creatively burned out. So this person stepped up, and they've been running the game. And I was having fun. I was invested because, like, I'm a writer, and it feels weird to say that. I wrote a really complicated backstory for my character. So I'm going to set the scene for you, and then I'll explain where this is all kind of going. Basically, how I learned to love D&D again via a controller. So my character in my one friend's game he's like, you can make anything you want. Sky's the limit. No races are off limits. No background too nutty. Just don't be like Elemenster's kid or something. I'm like, okay, fine. So the character I created was a shapeshifter from Ravenloft. And I had done some terrible things in Ravenloft, as, you know, per the grim, dark setting. Basically, long story short, I framed a guy for murder because I love him. I know, sounds weird and fucked up, but follow me through here. So I didn't want the dark powers to kill this person or Count Strahd. And my character's reasoning was, well, if he's in protective custody all the time, he'll have a better chance of survival. Because my character was a thief and an assassin. I got too close to my mark and I fell in love. So rather than kill my mark, because this entity or this group of individuals, I think it was like the Thieves Guild or something, wanted this person dead, I framed someone else for the murder. So he would look like he was responsible. And so the family, rather than kill him, would say, well, fine, our son is living in exile where we do not want to execute our only heir to the throne. So you're going to live in this tower for the rest of your life, and you will never see the proverbial skies again. So my character ran, and my character was on the run and eventually prayed to the dark powers of Ravenloft, just let me go. And surprisingly, I was. So much so, I was able to defeat the powers of Ravenloft by asking really nicely. Or so I thought. So I am taken to Faerun, where I join up with a group of adventurers, and not too long before I fall back into my old ways of being a bounty hunter, a thief, an assassin, basically not a very nice person. But then again, I fell in love, and things changed. My character started to develop relationships, and maybe they were starting to turn over a new leaf. And over the course of this adventure, there's been a lot of ups and downs, and some things I don't want to say because they could be listening to this podcast. I probably shouldn't have said a lot of that, but whatever. I hope you're not listening. And it's turned into this really emotional journey for my character. And this is honestly the most involved in a role-playing game I have ever been. In 20-something years, I have a dungeon master who cares where this goes. And that's also helping because of the group of people I'm actually kind of playing with. I'm getting that role-playing experience I've always been kind of looking for. And I'm loving where I'm going with this. I'm getting that fulfilling relationship between players, DM, and character. I'm getting that depth of story that I wanted, but it wasn't until I started getting into Baldur's Gate over the holidays that took a different level. Allow me to explain what I mean. So right now we're in a bit of a crossroads. for my one character. So I wrote my DM. I want to mix things up a little bit. My character is in a situation. I'm willing to take tragedy if it'll bring the game, if it'll elevate it. I'm not saying quite, bend me over, but give me something to chew on. Give me something to suffer for. And they were like, okay, let's chat. So we chatted, and I'm realizing some parallels between some characters in Baldur's Gate and myself, because there's an incredibly tragic yet heroic story to be told with one of your companions. And I really like the flavor that gave me. And literally, we've just finished this phone call. I was talking with my DM about this, and I wanted to create a broken person. And I realized by creating this broken person who wants to be redeemed, who wants to have all the love in the world, all the relationship, they want to have friends, they want to have stability, but there's a cost to be paid for that. And despite the fact I'm not surrounded by the mists of Barovia, I've never really left Ravenloft. Sure, the window dressing is different, but you can never escape who you are in the mirror every day, despite being a shapeshifter. I know who I am underneath that face. And I love the tragedy that is coming out of this in a lot of ways. And it's something that I'm learning to appreciate. As I learn more and more about Dungeons & Dragons lore, I'm digging into the rich character of what can be brought out with a really good set of players and a really good DM. And then we had a situation come up where we're doing sort of parallel plot lines. And I don't know if many other gaming groups do this, but we are. So we're having a problem with players and people meeting. So we decided between me, the game master, and one of my other friends, like, look, we want to keep the game going. We can always commit to this certain day to play, but we're running out of people. So could we create a secondary campaign so we can at least keep the momentum going? He's like, okay, sure. And I said, can we keep it in the same game world? So our characters that are involved in this other thing, my other character who's the shapeshifter, I still want them to exist. And he's like, okay, interesting, go on. So we created the characters in this city we've created is the fictional city of Cambridge. You may remember from the Cambridge Chronicles. We're part of this mercenary company called the Antaran Knights, which is a Sword Coast mercenary company with chapters in Neverwinter, Baldur's Gate, Waterdeep, etc., etc. And our current place is Cambridge, led by the Tabaxi Captain Brightscarf. And he's off on a mission with my character's girlfriend, Suvi, who is a monk that I made up of this monastic order called the Cloakwood Monks. And that also even ties into my friend B's game, where I play Suvi's sister, Janessa, who's like this little 16-year-old Goku. That's the only way I can describe it. She's basically Goku meets Krillin. So my friend who's the DM, Paul, said, okay, I want you and your buddy make new characters. They're going to be Antaran Knights, and this can be our drop-in, drop-out campaign, where if we need an adventure, we don't need to connect to a major plot line. But then we started talking, like, okay, we can do this. So I started creating a new character. And there's a friend of mine years ago, and he always told me, be more than a stat block. And I've been around more than enough tables where people always want to min-max, or always like, well, what's the optimal set of combat powers and all this other shit? And it's always like, how do I control the battlefield? How do I win? I don't like playing like that. I don't play to win. I want to play to have an interactive story. And that's kind of what I did with this character. So I created something. I decided to take two character classes I've never played before. And I picked a druid, because I've seen a number of people do it. I'm a Circle of the Shepherd, which means basically I'm the summoning class. So I'm going to have to learn a lot of mechanics. I don't quite understand how they function, but I'll figure it out. And I took a class, and I took a level in Bard. And my character is basically a wandering hippie diplomat who is dedicated to bringing epic stories and poems back to his particular circle. Now, what's different about my character is he's playing what's known as a shifter. Not a shapeshifter like my other character in this campaign, but they are a person who's were-touched. Basically, somewhere in the line, lycanthrope blood, like werewolves, were-tigers, shit like that. My character is a were-fox, and if you know anything about me in my personal life, my spirit animal is a fox, which is Wagoosh in Ojibwe. And I wanted to kind of train that. And then we kind of made the joke, oh, I've accidentally made a furry. Whatever, they're fine people, I'm sure. So my character is this druid, and their story is their archdruid has asked, as part of our initiation, to become members, Circle of the Skulk. Skulk is what the term is for a group of foxes. So all the people in this group are Swift Strider, were-touched. So the Archdruid has said, I want you to bring something back to the Grove that we can use, be it knowledge, be it an item, be it magic, be it anything. So my character is out wandering the Faerun and is wandering the Sword Coast and even going as far as the Sea of Fallen Stars to find something. And in his travels, he's been wild shaping, he's been just observing people, but trying to stay by himself, trying to find his own way in the world. And this is where I build in tragedy, but build in something kind of cool too. So he goes to this place known as the High Forest, and he falls in love with this nymph that he sees. And I know, yay, he gets the super hot girlfriend, but I wanted to give it something otherworldly because they're fae-touched. And the connection I wanted to build was two people who don't really belong in this world, but yet somehow find each other. And the tragedy is they spend several months together. It's wonderful. It's great. And he almost considers leaving his druid quest. Like, maybe I can be happy here protecting this part of the forest. And one morning he wakes up and she's gone. And he doesn't know what's going on with it, and it breaks his heart, and he pines for her nightly. And if you've ever heard a mournful animal cry, he does that every night. Because again, I wanted to break his heart. That's what I do. I like creating broken people. And so he resumes his quest, and eventually he comes back to civilization. He wants to be around people again. He's lonely. And he starts hearing bards and people in taverns and ale halls telling stories. And he's like, maybe that's what I can bring back to my people. So he takes a level in bard and decides, okay, maybe what I can bring back to you is the world. Because the druids by nature are typically isolationists. Sure, people deal with them, but they're not exactly, you're not going to run into a druid. You're not going to see them having a local chapter house in like Waterdeep. So he decides, I'll bring the world back to you. So he goes back to this place called Long Saddle, which is where our group is based out of. And he's like, Archdruid, here's what I present you. I give you to the world from what I understand of it. And it divides the Grove. People are like, yeah, that's a great idea. This would be great to really understand people. And other people are like, no, they already don't like us. What are you doing? So the Archdruid says, look, we don't accept your gifts yet. We're going to send you back out. And I need you to bring back something different this time. And he's going to be like, but I just did this for years. What more can you ask of me? And he's like, I need you to bring back wisdom. And he's like, okay, but I need you to bring back wisdom that inspires hope. I want our people to be united. We can't survive being isolated. We cannot help the world maintain its balance if we are above and a part of it. So that's what I placed upon you. Go out there and do something. So my character, I've named him Fox Singer. That's his true name. And it turns out in shifter cultures, there's your true name, which your friends and family call you, and there's your wandering name. And I've taken the name of Niji. Niji in Ojibwe means friend. So Niji decides, okay, if this is what I got to do, who am I to argue with the Arch Druid? So he goes back out into the world and he starts heading towards Baldur's Gate, one of the largest cities in and along the Sword Coast. And he's like, okay, well, if anyone's going to help me figure this out, maybe I'll find someone here. And he starts getting the idea to follow this mercenary company that I mentioned before, the Antaran Knights. They're well liked, they're well respected. He gets to Baldur's Gate, but on his way there, he encounters another nymph. I know, what are the odds? But this nymph starts torturing him from the shadows, like always appearing out of the corner of his eye when he's in the woods, starts taunting him. He starts getting horrific nightmares. And this nymph can shapeshift, and he starts looking like his girlfriend, Naliri, I think is what I called her. And he's like, why are you doing this? And she will never answer him. And this nymph seems to know very intimate details of the time that they spent together. He knows they're two separate people, or so he thinks, and he's not sure why. But the closer he gets to the civilization, the less often she appears, and eventually it just stops. So he goes to the Antaran Knights in Baldur's Gate, and he's like, look, I want to join up. And like, okay, great, kid. Can you lift a sword? My character has a strength of 8, so no. It's either 8 or 13. Either way, I'm kind of a wuss. I'm not that kind of druid. And I'm very charisma heavy, intelligence heavy, and wisdom heavy. So I'm more likely to talk my way out of a situation. I'm more likely to engage with the world around me than I am to engage in martial combat. And that's kind of where I wanted to go with this character. I wanted to build in a lot of interesting role play opportunities. And by doing that, because I know my game master loves that type of stuff, it's something that I can do. And the other person that I play with also loves role playing. It's not just dungeon crawl. We're not those types of players. So this is something incredibly rewarding. And I was able actually to invite another friend of mine who you have heard on the show before. I don't want to name them in case they're not kind of comfortable with it. But I was able to ask them, and they came on board. So we're going to play, and now we have this new core group of about 4 to 5 people who are really invested in telling a story and not just smashing things and doing that. So the character of Fox Singer is now finding themselves part of this new mercenary group, the Antaran Knights. But again, he's not a martial combat kind of guy, so he gets picked on a lot. They start calling him Tree Hugger, but he does make a few friends. He meets this elvish sorceress. I was watching He-Man, and that's where I got the idea from. And I was also thinking I want to give them something else. So I made him make friends with a warlock. And again, that ties into Baldur's Gate 3 because I really like Will. I think he's really cool. In fact, I've kind of made my new character in Baldur's Gate sort of like a different version of one of my other characters. I'm part warlock and part monk. I call myself Pact of the Fist. So I'm punching people with Avernus flowing through my veins. It's cool, and I'm utterly broken. But either way, it's interesting just to see where things can go from here, because like I said, I've given myself a lot of role play opportunities for what can be built in, for what can be accomplished with this character. So another thing, because of the where Long Saddle is set, where our game masters put this game, is that there's werewolves that are protecting this town. So I'm going, all right, I can use that. So I built in, when my character was young and cocky and figure, he's all full of piss and vinegar, he gets his ass kicked by this other name I called Satini. And this werewolf is like, you think you're hot shit? No, you're not. And he bullies my character. And we're not entirely sure why, because the bitter dudes, I think that's what they're called, they're meant to protect the town. But maybe it's that innate blood in our veins. They're werewolves where touched. Maybe it's a racism thing. And I'm building that in. Like, it's never boiled out into outright violence, but the groups don't like each other. It's like kind of West Side Story. And I'm not saying we're going to walk at each other and like snap our fingers and dance, but there's a rivalry, but it's not quite to the level of like Bloods and Crips, but it could very well spill over. All it takes is one wrong step. And then because my character's a bard, well, I kind of thought about like 80s cartoons. This is going to be kind of weird. I thought about Jem and the Holograms. And I got to thinking, okay, well, the Misfits, they're their rivals, so they're just like another shit-talking band. So what if a guy from the Bard College of Eloquence just didn't like me? So I basically made anti-David Bowie to be my rival, who basically just shit-talks me in this town. And again, like, I do slam poetry in my real life. Like, I like to do Guelph spoken word here. So I'm really used to just making shit up on the spot. And I'm not going to be like singing like Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult, because everybody assumed bards are musically inclined, and you don't have to be. So what I kind of did is channel a little bit of my indigenous background, because we're a very drum-based culture when it comes to some of our religious practices. And I'm not gonna, bang my bearskin drum from real life to do this, because that might be a line of sacrilege. Maybe I probably shouldn't cross, but I do have a drum, and I'm thinking, okay, I can do drums and I can do poetry. So I can recite epics and encouraging words to my group, but I can also use it to add flavor to a situation. I just need 30 seconds to think. So I'm really trying to draw upon the strengths of myself as a person. I draw upon the culture that I'm really starting to understand now, draw upon my experiences as a performer over the last 20-something years, and kind of dig into how I'm starting to view nature now, because I've really had not quite a religious awakening, but I'm looking at nature through different eyes now. And I find myself, when the spring and summer comes, I'll spend hours in the park just listening and just feeding the squirrels. Like, literally, I'm that guy in the park who feeds the squirrels all day. Like, if you've followed my social media for any number of months, I have a squirrel friend, Squirrel Mama, and we would have lunch every day in the park. I'd go down there, I'd play Pokemon Go, because it was like right in between like 6 stops, and I'd sit there and I would feed this squirrel nuts, and we would just hang out. She would have her nuts, and we'd sit there, and it literally felt like I was meeting an old friend. So that's why I kind of wanted to play a druid, to see if I could channel that experience into something different. And by playing a video game like Baldur's Gate, I'm now immersed in that Dungeons and Dragons world in a way I've never done before. Like, the only world I even know close to be might be Ravenloft, and even then it's basically fucking Castlevania. But with Faerun and the Forgotten Realms, every single time I've played outside of this, it has never felt like D&D. The time I've played Pathfinder, it never felt like D&D. Or it felt like generic fantasy with the serial number scratched off. And it's nothing against the game masters that I played with. They were fine people, and they did accomplish what they set out to do, with the exception of my first DM. It never was steeped in lore. And I've talked about this on previous iterations of this show, is I want that lore-rich experience that rewards knowledge of the world without being a know-it-all. Like, for example, if someone plays, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a really good example here. If someone were to play Battletech, and they're like, well, that clan mech wasn't in service at this time. It's only 3025. We're in the middle of the third succession war. You can't possibly be fighting a direwolf mech at this time. They haven't been invented. Like, no, I don't want that. I'm glad you know the setting. I'm glad you know all the tonnages of everything that's been made since the fucking Star League. Stop it. You're ruining it. But I do like a player that knows enough about their characters to enrich the experience. And that's what I want to bring. Like, I literally spent probably like 2 hours last night writing my background for Fox Singer, bringing in my druidic patron or goddess I follow is Shantae or something like that. I can't remember. I'm going to have to look it up. Basically, mother of the earth, basically the mother of agriculture, basically the mother of unity. And that's where I kind of got the idea for my character. And when I created Circle of the Skulk, I really wanted to embrace that loving nature, that harmonious existence and balance that basically is implied in the druid subclass or in the druid character class, but bring it something a little bit differently. Because I like from like every video I've watched from like Dungeon Dudes taking 20 D&D shorts, these characters they can be combat monsters. They can control the battlefield. They can do all this cool shit with wild shape. I'm not that kind of druid. I don't want that. I want it like I literally took Circle of the Shepherd so I could talk to animals. I want to make my DM, I'm sure he's going to have a lot of fun when he reads my sheet later, to engage in different abilities. I want to be able to always have the option to talk my way out of a situation. And I'm not saying I want to bluff them like the bard, but I literally have an 18 charisma as a druid. And that seems a little bit weird, considering my only experience with like druids is like Halsin from Baldur's Gate 3. Well, he's a charming guy in his own right, you know, Fox Singer's a little bit different, where I realize I'm not this physically imposing presence. Like I said, I think my character weighs 165 pounds soaking wet. So your average Best Buy employee, I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of running out there with a two-handed greatsword. Number one, I'm not proficient with it, but I think my character, like I have one spell that does damage, and that's Ice Knife, just because I love that idea of like Sub-Zero. But I've got like Comprehend Languages, Charm Person, Ensnare. I want stuff that's very roleplay heavy, and I have never come across a group that has ever taken Comprehend Languages. Not in 25 years of D&D or Pathfinder or Shadowrun or any system involving magic. Nobody thinks about it. So I'm really hoping my game master takes the opportunity to like give me a puzzle that maybe it's written in Draconic or Celestial or Abyssal or Undergnome or some bullshit. Give me something interesting. So I always want to make sure with this character, I'm giving myself lots of opportunity to allow my DM to bring the Forgotten Realms to life. Because one thing I didn't find out until remarkably recently is the guy who created the Forgotten Realms, Ed Greenwood, he literally comes to Guelph every couple of weeks to record something down at the round table. The show, I think it's called Six Sides of Gaming. So Tommy, here's your plug for the show. And they do something called Legacy of Mana or something. I haven't watched it, but I see all the pictures from Facebook. And I said to Tommy, man, to be a fly on the wall for those conversations. And I would love to get one of my books for Forgotten Realms signed, because I think I've got some very early Ed Greenwood stuff here. For like, I sold a lot of my AD&D second edition stuff a couple of years ago, but I would love to get some of these signatures. So maybe I'll talk to Tommy and find out when Ed's coming back. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I want to make the world feel lived in. And for the other people that I'm playing with, one of my friends is a huge D&D dork, and we actually hung out on Monday night, and we were talking about creating these new characters for this new game. And when they suggested try something I've never done before, I'm like, okay, this is a way to bring that D&D experience to life for me in a different way. And I know I'm creating a little bit of extra work for my DM, but they seem to love it. So I'm really excited about that. And my friend, like I said, I don't want to name them just in case they're not comfortable with it. They created something completely different, and it was just a lot of fun. Like, we sat there and started collaborating, and they told me about all these new D&D settings. We talked about Eberron, we talked about Darkhawk, we talked about, or not Darkhawk, Greyhawk. We talked about the Forgotten Realms, some other settings I never knew existed. We talked about Planescape, and I'm like, oh my god, this world is so huge. And yes, I've read these adventures and I understand them from that, but I've never experienced them. And it's one thing to look at a product from D&D mechanically. Do I like it or do I not? For example, I hate Critical Role. I'm sorry, but you fans are insufferable. but the setting is really interesting. Like, there's one of the books I reviewed a couple of years ago involves time magic and gravity magic. Some of those spells are, holy shit, world devastating. But they're really cool. The problem is how they're presented is really fucking annoying. But at the same time, my DM is accepting enough that if he wanted to introduce those elements without pulling an over-the-top Matt Mercer, he could. And that's really, really exciting for me. So I'm in this very euphoric D&D experience right now where I can literally play D&D anytime that I want. I just have to turn on my PlayStation 5 and I'm transported to the Forgotten Realms. That's awesome. Every other Monday, I play with my buddies and I can live an adventure in a different skin. And now I've got 2 different adventures. I've got the broken-hearted girl who escaped Ravenloft, and I've got the boy who wants to unite his people but don't know whether he can. And I've got these very human stories and I'm loving it. And I'm so excited to see what my friends can come up with, because my friend B, her character is this barbarian with this incredibly interesting past, and is it catching up to her? And we were on this mission that just began as a job, as a protection for the Lord of the city, but it turns out he's a fucking lunatic, and we're trying to retrieve this artifact. And this is when I was game mastering, and then when Paul took it over, it changed and went in a completely different direction. And I don't know, like I said, it's weird to fall in love with D&D, despite the fact we were first introduced to each other all the way back in 1992. Here it is, 2024, and it feels like I'm finally home. And it's weird. Like, I used to say for years, I like D&D, but I don't love D&D. Now I can finally say I do. Like, I reviewed a number of products over the holiday, and they're exciting. Like, I can't wait till we can fuck around in Planescape, so we can go to Sigil or Carceria or whatever the hell it is. I just got the deck of many things, which can fuck up your game real fucking bad. But it looks like a tarot deck, and it is one of the coolest looking things I've ever seen released. I am so excited. I went out and bought some of the books I didn't get last year. I went out and bought Big Bead's Guide to Giants. I reviewed the digital, but I didn't get the physical book, so I went out and bought the special edition. I went out and got the Guide to Dragons, which is ultimately kind of useless, but it's a very interesting insight into dragons, because I used to play a lot of dragonborn barbarians because I thought they looked cool. And again, I thought like a tank. I thought like damage. What can I do to get the most, bang for my buck? I don't want that. I don't want to be Conan. I don't want to be Legolas. I don't even want to be fucking Strider. No, I want to be like Hugo Weaving. I want to be like Elrond. I want to be the guy who's the diplomat who can fight. I want to be Frodo. Frodo is nothing special. He's not a fighter. He'll get his ass kicked. I want to be that person who can talk a situation, but if I have to throw down some serious spells, I can. But my first solution is going to be, can we talk this out? And am I basically just having my dinner with Andre with beholders? Maybe. But it creates an interesting experience, because everybody gets involved around the table, and it's not just who can throw 2d12 with a two-handed greatsword. No, it's different. You have to think creatively. You got to think fast. You got to think smart. And I'm loving it. And I really hope that the story of my shifter comes to... I want something beautiful to come out of it. And the way things are currently setting up, it's going to be amazingly, beautifully tragic because of what consequences might come of choices I'm going to have to make. I love it. I'm actually invested. And I've never been able to say that under a game master. I've never been invested. That's something you can't put a price on. And for this new character, a fox singer, I'm curious to see what happens when I start talking to animals. Like, what is the word on the forest floor, so to speak? But I also found out I can summon like 10,000 blink dogs and overwhelm somebody. I'm going to avoid doing things that'll mechanically break the game, mostly because I don't want it to come to a crawl. That's cool. I've got that in my back pocket. But my character, first and foremost, I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. What's your problem? What can we do? I want to be that first set of contact. And, I think I created a Jedi Guardian without really thinking about it. I don't know. Either way, I am certainly loving it. I'm glad I'm having fun for a change. I'm playing with some really great people. I've got a DM that cares. And that has re-energized me in ways I can't even begin to describe. The fact that I'm approaching Star Wars with a sense of fun and excitement. I've actually carved out the time to play every week so I can just be me and just bring Star Wars to life. That's fucking awesome. But I can live in D&D every 2 weeks and have fun there. And the fact that I can try out my builds in Baldur's Gate 3 is kind of amazing. I mean, it's not quite a one-to-one replica, but pretty goddamn close. So I'm loving it. So thank you for enjoying this time with me as I get a chance to ramble about Dungeons and Dragons in a completely new and exciting way. So next time here on the show, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to talk about. I know I was talking about maybe looking at some books. I kind of want to talk about Battletech because I bought the Clan Invasion box set to play with my buddy Calvin and my friend B. I've got like the 2 box sets that came out from Catalyst Game Labs. I'd love to talk about that. I guess update on other fronts. I am making pretty good progress on my Star Trek thing that I'm working on. I'd say I'm probably about quarter to halfway done so far. So I'm just going to keep clicking along in that to boldly go where no one has gone before. And that's a lot of fun too. So yeah, we'll see what doors that can open, and hopefully you'll see your favorite bird person in print at some point. So anyway, guys, until next time here on ThisWeekInGeek.net, I've been Mike the Birdman, and say may all your rolls be natural 20s, and don't you dare roll a nat 1.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@ThisWeekInGeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.